A mother-in-law's hatred is a poison that seeps slow. But Constance never believed in patience. She hauled her own son's mate to the flesh peddlers in the dead heart of winter, sold the woman she'd branded barren and worthless for 30 coins and a clear road to younger, fertile blood for her pack. Locked inside a rusted iron cage, Adelaide waited to be auctioned off like common livestock. A life of frozen brutality stretched ahead of her, but fate and the moon goddess carry a cruel sense of humor. The man who shattered that auction block was no slaver, he was the Alpha King. The stone walls of Winterfell Keep held no warmth, only a wet, gnawing cold that burrowed into bone and stayed there. For Adelaide, that chill ran deeper than winter. It was the temperature of her marriage. 3 years she'd been mated to Rowan, the future alpha of the Silver Moon Pack. At 18, she'd been bright and alive, tethered to her wolf, Phelan, like a second heartbeat. Now at 21, she was a specter drifting through her own existence. Her sin? An empty womb. In a medieval werewolf world, where a Luna's sole worth lay in producing strong heirs, Adelaide was destitute. "Drink it." Constance's voice, scraped like stone, dragged over stone. Adelaide stared down at the dark, thick liquid, still smoking inside the wooden goblet. Constance, Rowan's mother, the reigning Luna, loomed above her. A woman sculpted from frost and malice. Silver-streaked hair wrenched back so tight it tugged the corners of her shrewd, calculating eyes. "I said drink it, Adelaide. A fertility draught, brewed by the witches of the Black Bog. If you are not entirely withered inside, this will drag life from your barren soil." Adelaide's hands shook as she raised the cup. The stench hit first. Bitter ash, decaying leaves, and something sharp and acrid that made Phelan whimper and retreat to the farthest, darkest hollow of her mind. Ever since Constance had begun these treatments a year ago, Adelaide's bond with her wolf had grown terrifyingly faint. She could not shift. She could barely sense her own strength. She forced it down. It scorched her throat. She gagged. "Good." Constance ripped the goblet from her grip. "Though I imagine it's wasted coin. You are damaged goods, Adelaide. My son is a fool for tolerating you this long. The pack talks. They say the moon goddess cursed you, that your blood runs thin." "I am trying, Constance." Adelaide's voice came out raw, barely a whisper. Constance cracked the goblet down onto the heavy oak table. Adelaide swallowed hard against the knot in her throat. Her gaze drifted past Constance, searching for Rowan in the great hall, hoping her mate would step forward just once. But Rowan was a coward wrapped in a warrior's frame. He had stopped meeting her eyes weeks ago. His hours now belonged to the training yards and to the visiting Lady Genevieve, never to their shared chambers. That evening, the degradation found its pinnacle. The grand feast for the winter solstice filled the great hall with hundreds of wolves, all ripping into roasted meat and drowning in heavy ale. Adelaide sat in silence at Rowan's side. Constance rose at the head of the table. She tapped her silver goblet. Every voice died. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 8 underscore underscore. Constance's declaration rang off the vaulted stone ceiling. "We celebrate the sun's return, but we must also face the future of this pack. A pack with no heir is a pack the rogues will swallow whole." Her gaze cut straight to Adelaide. The silence turned solid, crushing. "It grieves me to say that our current union bears no fruit. The moon goddess demands strength, not sterility." Gasps scattered through the crowd like sparks. To speak of a mate's fertility in open hall, that was the deepest taboo. A humiliation reserved for banished Omegas. Adelaide turned to Rowan. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She begged through their fractured mind link. Rowan kept his eyes locked on his plate, his jaw clenched tight. He said nothing. He didn't so much as reach for her hand. In that crushing silence, Adelaide understood something she'd been refusing to see. Her marriage wasn't merely cold. It was a corpse. A wolf without a pack is a tragedy. A wolf forsaken by her mate while still seated at his side, that is a death you survive. Adelaide excused herself and fled the hall, mocking whispers trailing her like wolves on a blood scent. In her chambers, she stuffed a small satchel with trembling hands, tears scalding her cheeks. She had no destination. She only knew she couldn't stay, but Constance had already outpaced her by 10 moves. Before dawn broke over the snow-crowned peaks, 2 hulking guards shook Adelaide from sleep. One of them grunted. Dazed and bewildered, Adelaide pulled on her heaviest wool dress and wrapped herself in a fur-lined cloak. The courtyard hit her with a wall of freezing air. Constance stood beside a large, unmarked carriage of black iron. __quote_15__. Adelaide asked, her breath curling white in the cold. The lie left Constance's mouth without a ripple. You and I ride to the edge of the territory. An elder healer resides there. One last effort to cure whatever is rotting inside you. Every instinct in Adelaide's body shrieked. Deep beneath the herbal fog, Phelan clawed weakly at the walls of her mind. __quote_18__. But refusing a direct command from the reigning Luna was treason. Adelaide climbed into the carriage. Constance followed. Her face a locked door. For hours they rode in suffocating silence. The carriage rattled over frozen, rutted roads, carrying them further and further from the shelter of Silvermoon territory, deep into the lawless stretch known as the Grey Wastes. At last the carriage lurched to a stop. Adelaide peered through the small barred window. A dead forest surrounded them, skeletal and dense. In a clearing ahead waited a caravan of enclosed wagons, ringed by rough men and scarred wolves. The stench rolled over her. Old blood, unwashed flesh, despair. At the front of the caravan stood Lord Morvan, a notorious flesh peddler, a rogue wolf who'd built his fortune snatching exiled wolves, humans, and omegas, selling them to the highest bidder in underground markets. "What is this?" Adelaide whipped toward Constance, panic cracking her voice. "Why have we stopped here?" Constance didn't meet her eyes. She shoved the carriage door open and stepped into the snow. Rough hands seized Adelaide's arms and hauled her from the carriage. She kicked, she thrashed, but her body was weak, her wolf crushed. They dragged her to the center of the clearing and threw her to her knees in the snow before Morvan. "Ah," Morvan grinned, baring rotted teeth. "The Silvermoon Princess. You promised me pretty, Constance. You failed to mention beautiful." "Her beauty is worthless," Constance spat, drawing a heavy leather pouch from beneath her cloak. "She is barren, 3 years without a single swell of the belly, a drain on our resources, an insult to my son. I want her removed, taken far from the north." The truth struck Adelaide like an avalanche, sudden, total, burying everything. "No," she gasped, staring up at Constance. "You cannot do this. I am your son's mate. Rowan will destroy you for this." A harsh, barking laugh tore from Constance's throat. __quote_28__. From her sleeve she produced a rolled parchment bearing the royal seal of Silvermoon. Rowan's signature, unmistakable. He knew. Rowan had traded her like livestock to clear the path for Genevieve. The betrayal hit harder than any blade ever could. It caved in her chest, and in the wreckage of her shattered heart, the maid bond snapped clean. Adelaide screamed, raw, guttural, the sound of a soul torn in half. Morvan flipped a small pouch of silver coins to Constance. 30 pieces, as agreed for a sterile female. She'll fetch a fair price as a scullery hand or a bed warmer for some lesser rogue. Nothing more. See to it she never returns. Constance said without warmth, already turning her back. She climbed into the carriage without a single glance behind her. "Constance, please!" Adelaide sobbed, fighting the grip of the guards. But the carriage pulled away, leaving her on her knees in the snow. Morvan seized her jaw, wrenching her face toward the torchlight. Brand her with iron. Toss her in the holding cage with the rest of the strays. Freezing iron cuffs cracked against Adelaide's wrists. Wolfsbane laced the metal, searing her skin on contact, severing every last thread binding her to Phelan. Gone. Silence where her wolf had been. They hauled her to the back of a heavy wooden wagon and hurled her into a rusted cage. 7 days of travel, 7 days of horror. Adelaide survived on mouthfuls of stagnant water and crusts of stale bread. Cold gnawed through her flesh to the bone. The wolfsbane cuffs ate into her wrists, raw, weeping, festering. Around her, the other captives pressed together for warmth. Human peasants, rogue omegas, all of them hollow-eyed, broken past speech. Adelaide stopped talking after the first day, stopped crying after the second. Something worse than grief settled in. A vast, terrible numbness. She had been a noble woman, a Luna in training, a devoted mate. Now she was cargo, meat on a chain, sold for being shattered by the same hands that shattered her. On the 7th morning, the air changed. Wood smoke, roasting meat. The dense, sour reek of thousands of packed bodies seeping through the cage bars. The caravan lurched to a halt. Morvan's iron rod cracked against the cage. "We've arrived at Frostgate. Look lively, or I'll flay the skin from your backs." Frostgate, the black market of the wolf world. Adelaide shut her eyes, braced for the final descent. The place was a sprawling nightmare. Tents, wooden stages, and churned mud paths winding through the skeleton of an ancient, collapsed castle. Morality came here to rot. Mercenaries haggled beside rogue alphas. Disgraced lords browsed stalls of stolen weapons, forbidden potions, and living flesh. They dragged Adelaide from the cage. Her legs buckled, barely holding her upright. Filthy. Her golden hair matted into knots, her dress hanging in ribbons, her spirit crushed past recognition. Morvan's men shackled her into a line with a dozen other women. They marched toward the grand auction block at the center of the ruins. The crowd whistled, jeered, called out prices before they even reached the stage. Adelaide fixed her gaze on the mud. Then something shifted. The drunken roar of the market began dying, voice by voice, stall by stall. The air thickened, heavy, suffocating under a wave of raw, crushing dominance. The hair on Adelaide's arms rose. Even through the wolfsbane agony, even through the severed bond, Phelan stirred. One frantic pulse of instinct broke through the fog. Alpha. Not just any alpha, an alpha king. Adelaide forced her head up. The crowd parted like a blade splitting water. Through the gap came a contingent of massive warriors in dark forged steel, direwolf pelts draped heavy across their shoulders. At their center, mounted on a warhorse black as a moonless sky, King Gideon of the Ironblood Pack. He was the legend mothers whispered to frighten disobedient pups. Conqueror of the Eastern Territories before his 25th winter. Ruthless, brilliant, possessed of a battle savagery that scraped the edge of demonic. When he dismounted, the crowd forgot to breathe. Gideon was terrifying and beautiful. He towered past 6 feet, shoulders broad and brutal beneath dark leathers, hair black as raven feathers, eyes a molten, piercing gold that swept the market with unhurried contempt. A jagged scar crossed the bridge of his nose, the single flaw on an otherwise carved stone face. "What is the Ironblood King doing at Frostgate?" A trembling Omega whispered beside Adelaide. "His council demands a Luna," another murmured back. "He's rejected every noble woman they've sent. Came here looking for hidden warriors, they say." Gideon and his beta, Silas, claimed position near the auction block's front edge. Lesser lords stumbled backward without being told. The auction began. Morvan mounted the wooden stage, practically trembling with greed at the sight of a king in his audience. Captives were paraded up one by one, strengths announced, assets catalogued. Beads shouted in silver and gold. Morvan's voice pitched higher, signaling his guards forward. A special piece, a former highborn of the north. The guards wrenched Adelaide's chains, hauling her forward. She staggered up the wooden steps and crashed to her knees on the splintered planks. The crowd stirred, taking in her swollen face, her shattered aristocratic features. Quote 39 Morvan called out. Voice carrying. Quote 40 The degradation was total. Laughter burst from merchants crowding the front row. To be declared baron before hundreds of wolves, that was a wound deeper than any blade. Adelaide clenched her eyes shut, willing the boards beneath her to crack open and drag her down. Quote 41. A toothless innkeeper hollered. Quote 42. Quote 43. A greasy rogue barked. Quote 44. Then a scent struck her, overpowering, intoxicating. Pine needles, razor-sharp winter air, and the metallic bite of blood. It tore through the wolf's bane, clouding her veins like a blade through silk. Deep in her mind, Phelan reared back and unleashed a howl that shook her skull. Adelaide's breath caught. Her eyes flew open. In that same heartbeat, King Gideon went rigid. He had been turning away, completely indifferent to the auction, when something seized him mid-step. His massive frame locked tight. Those golden eyes cut toward the stage, finding Adelaide instantly. The courtyard air split with violent, crackling tension. Gideon's pupils swallowed the gold until his eyes burned nearly black. His aura crashed outward like a tidal wave, driving weaker wolves to their knees. Quote 46 Some merchant called, blind to the shift. Gideon moved, not walked, stalked, a predator closing distance on wounded prey. Silas glanced sideways, alarmed. Quote 47 Gideon didn't hear him. He reached the stage's edge, towering over Morvan. The flesh peddler was shaking visibly now, sweat rolling beneath the Alpha King's killing gaze. My king, Morvan stammered. Do you wish to bid on this barren creature? Gideon never looked at him. His eyes consumed Adelaide entirely. He saw past the filth, past the bruises, past the rusted iron biting her wrists. He saw her trembling, and from deep in his chest rose a growl, low, terrible, vibrating through the wooden stage beneath their feet. She is not barren. His voice was dark. A lethal purr that rolled across the silent courtyard. She is poisoned. Her wolf is suffocating under the iron you clamped on her. Morvan stumbled backward, palms raised. I only sell what I'm given, Your Grace. She's just a useless... He never finished. Gideon launched onto the stage with blinding speed. He passed the slaver without a glance and dropped to his knees before Adelaide. The crowd forgot how to breathe. The most feared man in the realm, kneeling in mud and filth for a discarded, cast-off wife. Gideon reached forward. His massive, calloused hands closed around the heavy iron cuffs. He didn't search for a key. One savage flex of his arms, and the metal screamed, buckled, and shattered. Adelaide gasped as the wolf's bane's fire released her skin. She looked up. Tear-blurred blue eyes met molten gold. Gideon's hands moved to his throat, unfastening the heavy black direwolf fur cloak. He drew it around Adelaide's shaking shoulders and pulled her against his chest. Then he rose, lifting her into his arms like she was made of air. He turned toward the stunned crowd. Fangs descended, eyes blazing with raw, possessive fury. She is not for sale. The Alpha King's roar crashed off the ruins of Frostgate. Quote 5 4 The journey from Frostgate to the Ironblood territories became a blur of speed, violence, and overwhelming sensation for Adelaide. The moment Gideon's declaration rang out, the market collapsed into chaos. Lord Morvan, realizing he had enslaved the fated mate of the Alpha King, bolted. He never reached the edge of the ruins. At one silent nod from Gideon, Silas and two Iron Blood warriors cut him off. Morvan's end, short, savage, absolute, rang out behind them as Gideon lifted Adelaide onto his warhorse. 3 days they rode east without mercy. Adelaide spent most of that journey bundled in Gideon's direwolf fur cloak, pressed firm against his chest. His heat seeped into her frozen, brutalized body like a narcotic. The scent of him, pine and winter air, threaded with that cold metallic edge of pure dominance, smoothed the torn edges of her soul, even as her rational mind shrieked warnings about the creature who held her. Gideon barely spoke during the ride. Commands reached his men through sharp gestures or guttural growls. But with Adelaide, something shifted. At every rest stop, he fed her broth and watered wine with his own hands. Those massive, scar-laced fingers moved with surgical precision, careful not to deepen a single bruise. He never requested consent, never offered reasons. He simply seized control of her survival. On the third afternoon, the serrated peaks of the Iron Mountains rose before them. Carved into a sheer cliff face sat the Iron Blood stronghold, the Iron Citadel. Black volcanic stone fused with reinforced iron. Built not for elegance, for war. Cold, unforgiving, and savage. A mirror of its king. As they crossed beneath the colossal iron gates, thousands of wolves pressed close to watch their sovereign return, a woman cradled in his arms. The mind link erupted, a roar of curiosity, suspicion, open hostility. Gideon ignored all of it. He didn't parade her through the great hall. He carried her straight to the royal quarters in the highest tower, dismissing every servant but one, an elderly woman called Martha. __55__. The command fell like a blade as he set Adelaide down on a vast bed piled with furs. _56. He turned toward the door. Adelaide's panic surged, alone, in this cold fortress among strangers. She grabbed his sleeve. Her fingers were skeletal, her nails torn. Gideon halted. His gaze dropped to her grip on his dark leather arm, then lifted to her face. The molten gold in his eyes had dimmed to something harder. Something unreadable. "Where are you going?" Her voice fractured on the words. "To convene the council," Gideon said, low as distant thunder. "They must understand. The balance of this realm has changed. Rest, Adelaide. You are safe here. No one will touch you within these walls. Ever again. Upon my life." A king's oath to his mate. Solemn. Irreversible. He eased her fingers free and strode from the chamber. The heavy oak door sealed shut behind him. Martha moved fast, a bustling woman with warm eyes and no patience for delay. She lowered Adelaide into steaming water, thick with lavender and healing herbs, scrubbing away the grime of the road and the slave market with steady hands. When Martha uncovered the deep, festering chemical burns wringing Adelaide's wrists, souvenirs of the wolfsbane cuffs, a hiss escaped her teeth. "Animals," she spat. "Doing this to a female, a fated mate. Lord Morvan got off far too easy." After the bath, Adelaide was wrapped in a soft green wool tunic and settled back among the furs. Mother Beatrice arrived shortly, ancient, the pack's chief healer. Her face a terrain of deep wrinkles, but those eyes, sharp as broken glass. She examined the burns first, smoothing on a cool, bitter-smelling salve. Then her palms settled against Adelaide's abdomen, her eyes closed. She stayed like that for a long time, brow knotted, breathing slow. Phelan, still frail but unshackled from the iron, stirred restlessly inside Adelaide's mind. Beatrice said at last, eyes opening. Beatrice's face went dark as a storm front. "A witch's brew. I knew I smelled that taint. Child, that was no fertility draught. It was a suppression tincture laced with trace moonshade. A poison that slowly severs the bond between wolf and human. It mimics true barrenness, and given enough time, it kills." The room tilted beneath Adelaide. The full shape of it crashed down on her at once. Constance hadn't simply despised her. She had been killing Adelaide by inches, slow, deliberate poison, while branding her the broken one. Adelaide's voice cracked, her heart slamming against bone. Beatrice gathered both her hands, held them firm. No, you are not. And if your wolf heals fully, you may face the opposite problem entirely. The moon goddess does not bind an alpha king to a shattered mate. What Gideon feels is real. The life you could carry, vast beyond measure. But the road to healing stretches long before us. Adelaide sank into the pillows. Tears slid down her temples into her hair. Too much. All of it, too much. The depth of what had been done to her, the crushing weight of what lay ahead. She was the Ironblood King's fated mate, and she was not broken. She had simply been betrayed with surgical, merciless precision. The Ironblood Council was furious. Gideon occupied the head of the long obsidian table, absorbing every objection his elders and ranking warriors hurled across it. The air crackled with barely leashed aggression. Commander Caden bellowed, a scarred warrior who measured worth in blood spilled. Silas cut in, his beta's voice level as stone. She survived rock bottom. She knows suffering most of us never will. She was sold because she is barren, Caden fired back, fist cracking against the table. Eluna's sole duty, heirs. An alpha king demands strong sons to secure the bloodline. You have claimed a broken vessel, my king. Gideon let their noise roll over him like water. His aura stayed leashed, but something lethal simmered behind his eyes. He allowed them their grievances, their tradition-soaked fear. Are you finished? Quiet, almost soft. The chamber turned to stone. That whisper carried more violence than any roar ever could. He rose to his full height, casting shadow across every face at the table. You question my judgment. You question the moon goddess herself, the one who braided her fate into mine. Adelaide is my mate. By law, by blood, by sacred bond. She is your Luna. Any slight against her is a slight against me, and the penalty is death. Would anyone else like to challenge her worthiness? Not a breath, not a twitch. Even Caden dropped his gaze, swallowing whatever remained of his defiance. Gideon's wrath was not a thing one tested and survived, quote 78, quote. He declared, quote 79, quote 80, quote. Caden ventured, lifting his eyes just barely. Quote 81, A cold, razor-thin smile carved across Gideon's mouth. Oh, they will know. Xylus, dispatch a courier to Silvermoon. Inform Alpha Rowan and Luna Dowager Constance that King Gideon of the Ironblood commands their attendance at the full moon mating ceremony. Tell them we wish to express our gratitude for their generous gift. Personally. Xylus bowed low, a sharp gleam in his eye. At once, my king. While political storms gathered below, Adelaide spent the following week mending under the watchful hands of Martha and Beatrice. The wolf's bane drained from her blood, the burns wringing her wrists closed slowly, leaving pale silver scars like bracelets she never asked for. Day by day, her bond with Phelan strengthened. She could shift again, racing through the enclosed royal gardens, wind tearing through her fur for the first time in a year. But the wounds beneath the skin ran deeper than any poison. Rowan's silent complicity, Constance's calculated cruelty. Both haunted her sleep like wolves circling a dying fire. And then there was Gideon. He came every evening. He would fold himself into the armchair beside the hearth, reading dispatches or drawing a whetstone along his blade while she rested. Never pushing conversation, never reaching for the physical rights the bond entitled him to. Yet his presence filled every corner of the room. Weight, shield, invitation, all woven into one. You don't know me, Adelaide murmured one night, watching firelight trace the scars across his jaw. Gideon steeled the dagger against the stone. I know your scent. I know the rhythm of your heartbeat. I know the sound your soul makes when it calls to mine. Everything else is detail, Adelaide, and we have a lifetime to learn the details. They despise me here, she whispered. Your people think I am weak. barren. Gideon's golden eyes locked onto hers, blazing with sudden ferocious heat. Underquote under 88. Adelaide gave a single, silent nod. Gideon rose from where he sat and crossed to the bed, lowering himself to one knee so his gaze met hers directly. Quote 89. He extended his hand, letting it hover over hers, waiting. Adelaide slid her fingers beneath his. The mate bond sparked on contact, a jolt of adrenaline laced with warmth flooding her blood. Gideon murmured. That chance arrived ahead of schedule. 3 days before the full moon, Gideon convened a formal court in the Great Hall. Hundreds filled the chamber, iron-blood warriors, elders, nobility, artisans. Adelaide was seated on a smaller throne beside Gideon's massive obsidian seat. She wore a gown of heavy dark blue velvet, its high collar concealing whatever bruises still lingered. Her hair had been woven into elaborate braids. Her jewelry was sparse. Inside, she trembled. Outside, she held her chin high, drawing on every fragment of Luna training drilled into her years ago. Court business unfolded, trade reports, border skirmishes, winter storms battering the passes. Adelaide watched in silence, cataloging the rigid hierarchy and the veiled hostility radiating from noblewomen who had once hoped to claim Gideon for themselves. Near the session's end, Lady Bryony stepped forward, Caden's sister, a formidable warrior in her own right. Beautiful in a sharp, lethal way, and she fixed Adelaide with undisguised contempt. Your Grace, Bryony addressed Gideon, though her stare never left Adelaide. The women of the Iron Blood are known for their strength. We breed alphas. We hunt alongside our packs. Your mother, our previous Luna, could best 3 alphas in combat at once. We fear, my king, that the pack's edge will dull under a less capable Luna. Agreement rippled through the hall. Bryony had struck the pack's rawest nerve with surgical precision. Gideon's jaw clenched hard. Adelaide is my mate, Bryony. Her capability is not yours to question. Of course, Your Grace, Bryony replied, her voice smooth as poison. But perhaps, to ease the pack's concerns, our new Luna might agree to a traditional Iron Blood demonstration. Not a duel, naturally. A brittle smile. Merely a display of connection. A simple call to the wild, proving her wolf is sound. The trap was masterful. Passive-aggressive. Weaponizing the rumors of Adelaide's fractured bond with her wolf. Refuse, and she confirmed every whispered fear. Attempt it and fail. Public humiliation before the entire pack. Gideon drew breath to roar his dismissal. Adelaide stood first. The hall went dead silent. No one had expected it. She descended from the dais, walking past Bryony without a glance, until she stood alone in the center of the room. She felt it all, the crushing weight of their judgment, the ghost of Constance's voice hissing that word, sterile, the memory of Rowan staring at his plate as though she didn't exist. Anger, grief, a hunger for justice that had simmered too long. It boiled over now. She called inward. Phelan answered, her voice fiercer than it had ever been, shaking with possessive fury. Adelaide closed her eyes, drew one long breath. She pulled from the primal fire of the mate bond, the heat of the Iron Citadel's ancient stones, and her own unbreakable will. Then she opened her mouth and released a howl from the deepest chamber of her soul. Not the thin, reedy cry of a northern wolf. This was something raw and primordial, a sound that tore through the great hall like a blade. It carried the fracturing tension of a winter storm, the searing grief of betrayal, and the lethal, commanding authority of a queen staking her claim. The stones of the fortress vibrated beneath it. The reaction was immediate. Wolves across the hall staggered, gasping under the sheer weight of her aura. Weaker wolves buckled to their knees, their inner wolves bowing, unable to resist the dominance in that sound. Even Xylus went rigid. Even Caden's eyes blew wide with shock. Adelaide let the call fade, opened her eyes. The golden radiance of the mate bond drained slowly from her blue eyes. Her gaze locked onto Lady Bryony. Adelaide's voice rang clean and sharp across the silent hall. "But my wolf is anything but broken. I am the fated mate of the Ironblood King, and I will not be tested by his subjects." She turned, climbed the dais, and claimed her seat beside Gideon as if she'd been born to it. Silence held the hall for one breathless moment. Then the warriors erupted. A thundering roar of approval shook the stone walls. This was a pack built on raw power, and they had just watched it bare its teeth. Gideon leaned back into his throne. His golden eyes blazed with pride and something fiercer: possession. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply reached over, took Adelaide's hand, and wove his fingers through hers. A public claim, her first victory, witnessed by every soul in the hall. The broken northern bride had ceased to exist. The Queen of the Ironblood had arrived. The road to the Ironblood Keep punished every bone in the body, but for Constance, Dowager Luna of Silvermoon, it tasted like triumph. She sat inside her velvet-lined carriage, flanked by her son Rowan and his new mate, Genevieve of House Sterling, whose belly strained heavy with child. Constance wore the smug calm of a woman who had bent destiny to her will. She tugged her ermine cloak tighter against the savage cold of the Iron Mountains. Rowan shifted, his handsome but soft face drained of color. Constance snapped, though even she felt the ancient, crushing weight of the Iron Mountains pressing against her ribs. Genevieve, pretty and sharp-tongued, with her hand resting proudly on her swollen belly, tilted her chin. Quote underscore 108 underscore. Constance's lips curled. Precisely, my dear. You are everything a Luna should be. Fruitful, obedient. Nothing like the useless trash we finally scraped off our boots. Rowan turned to the frost-laced window. Something, guilt perhaps, flickered across his features at the mention of Adelaide. He smothered it quickly. He had a strong mate now, a pup on the way. His conscience could rest. When the carriage rolled through the massive spiked iron gates of the citadel, the sheer scale of the Ironblood stronghold struck them mute. Thousands of elite guards stood rigid along the battlements. The air hit thick and heavy, roasted meat, rare spices, and beneath it all, the intoxicating, predatory musk of an apex pack preparing for celebration. Beta Silas waited in the courtyard, draped in dark leather and a heavy wolf pelt. His face could have been chiseled from granite. Alpha Rowan, Dowager Constance, Lady Genevieve. Each name landed flat, stripped of warmth. You are expected in the Great Hall. The king holds court before the moon rises. Constance descended from the carriage, chin lifted like a blade. Thank you, Beta Silas. We bring magnificent gifts from Silvermoon territory to honor your new queen. I'm certain the queen will find your presence unforgettable. Something sharp glinted behind Silas's eyes. Constance was far too pleased with herself to notice. They moved through labyrinthine stone corridors until the heavy oak doors of the great hall groaned open, and the sight beyond ripped the air from their lungs. The hall was a cathedral of wealth and war. Tapestries of crushed velvet and woven gold draped the walls. Hundreds of alpha-ranked warriors, lords and ladies of the Ironblood and their vassal territories, stood in precise, disciplined rows. And there, at the far end, enthroned upon a massive seat, forged from obsidian and raw iron, sat King Gideon. He was power-made flesh, a tunic of midnight blue silk threaded with silver, a jagged iron crown resting heavy on raven-black hair. His golden eyes, luminous, predatory, tracked every step of their approach. Constance, Rowan, and Genevieve walked the long aisle. The silence of the hall bore down on them like stone. They reached the base of the dais and bowed low. Quote 114. Gideon's voice rolled through the cavernous room like distant thunder. Constance straightened, arranging her most practiced smile. King Gideon, The Silver Moon Pack extends its deepest congratulations on your fated mating. We bring 20 chests of northern silk, 10 barrels of our finest mead, and the warm wishes of our growing family. She gestured toward Genevieve's belly. Gideon did not smile. He leaned forward, resting his chin on one scarred hand. Constance's smile cracked. I do not understand, Your Grace. We summoned you here today, Gideon continued, his tone lethally even, because my queen made a personal request for your attendance. She wished to repay a kindness. Rowan frowned, stepping forward. Your Grace, we seek only to honor your queen. If we have caused offense, you will meet her now. Gideon rose to his feet. The full weight of his alpha aura crashed through the hall, driving Rowan to his knees in an instant. Genevieve gasped, hands flying to her stomach. Constance shook where she stood, knees buckling against each other. Gideon extended one hand toward the heavy velvet curtains behind the thrones. Presenting the Luna of the Iron Blood Pack, the true queen of the East. The curtains parted. The woman who emerged was a vision of devastating, otherworldly beauty. She wore a gown of pure spun silver that pooled around her like liquid moonlight. A crown of woven winter roses and iron rested upon her golden hair. Her posture, flawless. Her shoulders, thrown back. Her aura radiated a blinding Luna power that rivaled the king's own dominance. It was Adelaide. The great hall held its breath as she descended the 3 small steps to stand at Gideon's side. He lifted her hand to his lips. His golden eyes never left her face. Rowan's jaw dropped. Every drop of color drained from him, leaving his skin a ghastly, sickly white. He tried to speak, only a strangled, choking sound escaped. Constance staggered backward, one hand clutching her chest as though an arrow had struck her. Underscore, quote, underscore, 124, underscore. She whispered, her eyes stretched wide with a terror so deep it bordered on madness. Adelaide's voice carried no trace of the soft, frightened whisper that once haunted the corridors of Winterfell Keep. It rang through the hall, resonant, commanding, unmistakably royal. Rowan, it has been a long winter, has it not? Genevieve, blind to the history, looked between them in confusion. Rowan, who is this woman? Why does she look at you that way? Rowan could not answer. His gaze had locked onto Adelaide's neck, searching for the mating mark he had rejected. He found only flawless skin, skin that would soon bear the claim of the most powerful alpha alive. Constance stammered, scrambling to salvage what was already ash. She forced a wild, hysterical laugh. Gideon released a low, terrifying growl. He snapped his fingers. Beta Silas stepped forward and unrolled a piece of parchment. Silas read aloud to the frozen hall. Gasps tore through the visiting dignitaries. Selling a pack member was a crime. Selling a mated daughter to flesh peddlers was an abomination. Silas unrolled a second parchment. Rowan cried, his voice splintering with panic. He turned to Adelaide, eyes desperate, begging. She was never barren. You sniveling coward! Gideon roared, and the chandeliers shook. She was poisoned. Silence crushed the hall like a closing fist. Gideon's gaze locked onto Constance, eyes burning with something beyond rage. Mother Beatrice, our chief healer, discovered traces of moonshade in her blood. A slow poison, administered daily, designed to smother her wolf and counterfeit barrenness. A poison you brewed, Constance. Genevieve shrieked, stumbling backward from Constance and Rowan, her face twisted in horror. You poisoned her. You sold your own blood. Constance saw the walls closing in. The polished mask of the elegant dowager splintered apart, exposing the desperate, hideous creature underneath. She bared her teeth at Adelaide. She was weak, a northern beggar without a dowry. She deserved nothing. I did what was necessary to protect the Silver Moon bloodline. And in doing so, Adelaide said evenly, stepping forward, you annihilated it. Her gaze dropped to Rowan, still on his knees against the cold marble. I loved you, Rowan. I swallowed the whispers, the coldness, the cruel little jabs, because I believed we were mates. But you stood idle while your mother shattered my soul. Then you signed my life away for a dowry of war horses. You are no Alpha, you are the shadow of a man. She turned to Gideon. My king, they kneel in your domain. Their judgment is yours. Gideon descended from the dais. Each heavy boot strike rang off the marble like a war drum. He stopped before Constance. The dowager recoiled, trembling violently beneath the crushing, suffocating pressure of his killing intent. In the old days, Gideon said, his voice terrifyingly soft, I would have torn your throat out and nailed your skull to the gates of this citadel as a warning. Constance whimpered. Tears of raw terror carved lines through her powdered face. But my queen possesses a more poetic sense of justice, Gideon continued. Death is too swift for a woman who treasures status and comfort above all living things. He turned to face the hall. Hear the judgment of the Iron Blood. Rowan of Silvermoon, you are stripped of your alpha title. You are weak, treacherous, unfit to lead. Your territory is annexed as a vassal state of the Iron Blood Kingdom. Your warriors will fold into our ranks. Your lands fall under the authority of Beta Silas. Rowan wept openly, face buried in his palms. Everything he had betrayed Adelaide to keep, his title, his pride, his pack, erased in a single breath. As for you, Constance, Gideon's voice sank to a venomous whisper. You sold my mate for 30 pieces of silver to the Frostgate slave markets, so it is only just that you taste the life you chose for her. Constance's eyes blew wide with animal panic. No, no, please, I am highborn, I am a dowager Luna. You are nothing, Gideon corrected. Guards, strip her silks, bind her wrists in iron. Without Wolfsbane, for she has no wolf worth suppressing. She is banished to the rock quarries of the grey wastes. She will crack stone in the freezing cold until her last miserable breath. When she stops working, she does not eat. No! Constance screamed as two enormous Ironblood warriors seized her arms. Rowan, help me! Genevieve! But Rowan never raised his head. Genevieve turned away in revulsion. Constance was hauled, thrashing and shrieking from the great hall, her desperate wails fading down the long stone corridors until only silence remained. Gideon's gaze shifted to Genevieve, who stood trembling, both hands pressed against her swollen belly. Lady Genevieve of House Sterling, you were a piece on Constance's board. You carry a pup, and the Iron Blood do not punish the innocent. You may return to the river pack with your dowry intact, or you may remain with this Omega. He gestured toward Rowan with open contempt. And live as a commoner in my lands. The choice belongs to you. Genevieve stared at Rowan, a man shorn of title, wealth, and every scrap of dignity. She spat on the floor beside him. I am a daughter of House Sterling. I will not raise my child beside a coward. She bowed awkwardly to Adelaide and Gideon. Thank you, Your Grace. I will return to my father. Rowan remained alone on the marble, broken, pathetic, hollow. At a quiet note from Silas, guards hauled him upright and dragged him toward the servants' quarters. He would spend the rest of his days shoveling filth from the stables of wolves he once believed himself better than. The great doors groaned shut. The reek of betrayal dissolved, replaced by the clean bite of pine, winter air, and the electric hum of the ceremony to come. Gideon turned back to Adelaide. The cold, ruthless king dissolved, and what remained was only the mate. Fiercely devoted, completely hers. His fingers found her jaw, tracing the line of it with impossible gentleness. __, quote _ 136 __. Quiet words, almost reverent. Adelaide drew a long breath. That heavy, poisonous weight she'd carried for 3 years, the one lodged deep behind her ribs, was gone. Every ghost that haunted Winterfell Keep had been driven out. She looked into Gideon's golden eyes and saw it all. Adoration, protection, a fire that would never dim. __, quote _ 137 __. Her smile broke wide, radiant, real, and deep inside her chest, Phelan purred. Quote 138 __. Gideon's gaze darkened with hunger. He swept her into his arms like she weighed nothing, carried her back up the stone steps to the center of the dais. Above them, the full moon drove silver light through the high stained glass, drenching them both in something otherworldly. Before the assembled might of the Ironblood Kingdom, every warrior, every lord, every wolf, Gideon bared his throat to her. Adelaide leaned close. Her fangs descended. She bit deep into the juncture of his shoulder, claiming her king. Gideon's roar shook the rafters. Raw, guttural, pure triumph. He claimed her in return. The bond locked into place like a key turning in an ancient lock. Golden magic flooded through them both, intoxicating, intertwining their souls beyond death. The great hall shattered into deafening howls. Thousands of wolves crying out as one, welcoming their new Luna, their queen who had walked through hellfire and emerged forged in iron. 4 months later, the iron citadel hummed with life. Spring had finally shattered the frost. Wildflowers rioted through the royal gardens. Adelaide sat in a sunlit courtyard, Gideon's massive head resting in her lap. He dozed like a wolf at peace, spent from a morning drilling his generals. She smiled, threading her fingers through his raven hair. Her other hand settled over the gentle swell of her stomach. The barren northern bride, that's what they'd called her. Now she carried the heir to the Ironblood throne. Mother Beatrice had confirmed it with shining eyes. 2 strong heartbeats, not one. She had lost a family built on poison and lies, only to receive the greatest kingdom and the fiercest love the moon goddess could bestow. Adelaide's path from discarded, brutalized wife to revered queen of the Ironblood Kingdom stands as proof. Resilience and fated destiny cannot be extinguished. Stripped of her dignity, poisoned by the very people sworn to protect her, she could have surrendered in the freezing darkness of those slave cages. But the deepest betrayals forged the hardest steel. Gideon, a king feared by every pack on the continent, looked past rusted iron and false labels. He saw what no one else would, the unbroken spirit of his equal. Constance and Rowan's cruelty became the instrument of their own ruin. Karma, guided by the moon goddess, does not forget. In the end, Adelaide claimed not only justice and a throne, but a love that healed wounds no healer could reach. The most magnificent reigns begin where the deepest sorrows end.